Jaafar Jackson just brought Michael's legacy back to life, and fans are shocked. April 24th, 2026. A Friday night that changed Hollywood. For months, movie theaters across America had been struggling to fill seats. Then suddenly, everything changed. The crowds packed the lobbies. Popcorn lines stretched around entire hallways. Teenagers who weren't even born when Michael Jackson released his biggest albums were showing up in sequin jackets, filming TikToks outside sold-out screenings. And by Sunday night, the numbers shocked the industry. $97 million domestically. Over $217 million worldwide. The biggest opening weekend ever for a music biopic. Bigger than Bohemian Rhapsody. Bigger than Elvis. Bigger than Straight Outta Compton. Against all odds, the king of pop was back. But here's the part almost nobody is talking about. The man audiences were watching on screen wasn't Michael Jackson. It was a 29-year-old first-time actor who had never carried a film before in his life. A quiet young man with no Hollywood resume, no blockbuster experience, and no safety net. He was Michael's nephew, Jaafar Jackson. And the truth is, this entire comeback moment, the sold-out theaters, the streaming resurgence, the renewed obsession with Michael Jackson's music, doesn't happen without him. This is the real story of how Jaafar Jackson saved the legacy of the king of pop. Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel goes beyond the headlines, beyond the PR machine, and beyond the spectacle to uncover what's really happening behind the biggest stories in entertainment. And right now, the entertainment world is focused on one film, Michael. The movie has completely shattered expectations. It delivered the biggest trailer launch in Lionsgate history, reignited interest in Michael Jackson's catalog, and reportedly pushed his music back to the top of global streaming charts nearly 17 years after his death. But underneath all the headlines and box office records is a much quieter story. A story about one young man being handed an impossible assignment. Play your own uncle. Dance like him. Move like him. Speak like him. Become him. All while carrying the weight of one of the most controversial and complicated legacies in music history. That young man was Jaafar Jackson. And tonight, we're breaking down how he pulled it off, the brutal preparation, the years of isolation, the pressure, the sacrifice, the bleeding feet, and the reason audiences are calling his performance one of the most uncanny musical portrayals ever captured on screen. Because the truth is, this casting should never have worked. Back in 2019, legendary producer Graham King secured the rights to make a Michael Jackson biopic. This is the same producer behind Bohemian Rhapsody, the Freddie Mercury film that grossed nearly $1 billion worldwide and won Rami Malek an Oscar. So when Graham King started searching for the next Michael Jackson, Hollywood paid attention. Established actors auditioned. Professional dancers auditioned. Major stars reportedly circled the role. And King rejected all of them, because playing Michael Jackson wasn't just about choreography. It was the tiny details, the way he carried his shoulders, the pauses between his words, the softness in his voice, the strange contradiction of someone who could command an entire stadium 1 second and look painfully shy the next. You can imitate the moonwalk. You can study the spins. But Michael Jackson's presence? That's something else entirely. Then, in 2020, Graham King reportedly received a voice note from a young man reading lines in Michael's voice. Not singing, just speaking. That voice belonged to Jaafar Jackson. At the time, he was only 23 years old. He had no acting credits and almost no public profile. Ironically, he had reportedly struggled to launch a music career because industry executives thought his voice sounded too much like Michael Jackson's. The exact thing that hurt his music career became the reason he landed the biggest role of his life. And here's the wildest part. After getting cast, Jaafar told almost nobody. Not his cousins. Not his brothers. Not even his own mother. For nearly a full year, the Jackson family reportedly had no idea he had been chosen to play Michael. According to interviews, Jaafar kept the role secret because he wasn't sure he could actually do it. Think about that pressure. The Jackson family legacy. A $200 million production. One of the most scrutinized figures in entertainment history. And everything depended on whether a first-time actor could convince audiences they were watching Michael Jackson Reborn. So while entertainment reporters were speculating online and fans argued over casting rumors, Jaafar disappeared. For 2 years, he trained obsessively. Voice coaches, movement coaches, dance rehearsals every single day. He studied concert footage, private family recordings, interviews, handwritten notes, journals, and even Michael's personal affirmations. Then he moved into Havenhurst, the Jackson family estate where Michael grew up. The same house where Michael rehearsed. The same rooms where he wrote music. The same dance studio where he practiced alone for hours. Jaafar reportedly turned the estate into a research lab. He lived in Michael's old environment and immersed himself completely in his uncle's world. At one point, even Michael's longtime choreographers reportedly questioned whether the performance was possible. Michael's movements weren't just difficult, they were considered almost impossible to replicate authentically. Jaafar's response was simple: "Give me time." And time became obsession. In interviews, he described rehearsing for hours trying to perfect a single move. He talked about dancing until his feet went numb, bleeding through rehearsals, waking up exhausted, and forcing himself back into training again the next morning. For 2 straight years, while the world had no idea what he was building. And when his own mother finally saw footage from the film, she reportedly said she couldn't even recognize him anymore. Because for brief moments, it genuinely looked like Michael Jackson had returned. And that's why this movie matters beyond the box office. Because the Jackson legacy was fading. For years, Michael Jackson's name had been trapped inside controversy, lawsuits, documentaries, debates, and endless online arguments. Younger generations recognized the moonwalk and the name Thriller, but many had never truly experienced what made him different. This film changed that. Suddenly, teenagers were streaming Thriller again. Younger audiences were discovering Off the Wall for the first time. Fans were returning to theaters multiple times. And whether critics liked the movie or not, nearly everyone agreed on one thing: Jaafar Jackson delivered. Even reviews criticizing the script repeatedly described his performance as uncanny, meaning it stopped feeling like an impersonation. For stretches of the movie, audiences forgot they were watching an actor at all. Now, not everyone supports the film. Critics accused it of sanitizing parts of Michael Jackson's life and avoiding some of the darker controversies surrounding his legacy. Reports about rewrites and reshoots followed the production for months. But however people feel about the movie itself, one thing is impossible to deny: Jaafar Jackson carried it. Without his performance, there is no comeback story, no record-breaking opening, no streaming resurgence, no renewed cultural fascination with Michael Jackson. And what makes the story even more powerful is that Jaafar never approached the role like a career move. In interviews, he talks less about fame and more about honoring his uncle as a human being. Not just the performer, the man behind the image. He grew up inside a family still living with Michael's absence. And instead of trying to imitate a global icon, he tried to reconnect audiences with the emotional reality of who Michael Jackson was. That's why this performance resonates. It doesn't feel calculated. It feels personal. And now the conversation has shifted toward what happens next. Because the current film only covers part of Michael Jackson's life. The rise of the Jackson 5, the breakthrough years, bad, the global superstardom. But the darker years, the scandals, the legal battles, the decline, the isolation, still haven't fully been explored. And if a second film happens, Jaafar Jackson will have to go even deeper. He'll have to age into those years, face the controversies, carry the emotional weight of Michael's final chapters. That's a much harder movie. But after everything we now know about his preparation, his discipline, and the lengths he went to disappear into this role, betting against him feels dangerous. Because against all expectations, Michael Jackson is back in the conversation. Back on playlists. Back in theaters. Back on global charts. Back in popular culture. And the person who brought him back wasn't CGI. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't marketing. It was one quiet young man who spent 2 years sacrificing himself to make sure the world remembered who Michael Jackson really was. That's the real story. And that's why 2026 may ultimately be remembered as the year Jaafar Jackson saved the legacy of the King of Pop.